This video is sponsored by the Association of Anaesthetists, A-Line, Health Education North East and NEMO.
Our goal for the next half an hour or so is to discuss about challenges in career progression as healthcare professionals in the NHS. And I'll start off by saying a few things and to start off with, and then I'll let the panelists initiate the discussion. And as I mentioned before, the audience, if you have any questions, please do ask. We will keep note of all of them and try to get back to you as much as possible. So we are once again joined by Mr. Surash and Dr. Patel, but I would like to welcome a few other panelists. So we are joined by Professor Namita Kumar. She is the Postgraduate Dean of the Health Education England North East. She's a council member at Royal College of Physicians, and she currently works as a consultant rheumatologist in County Durham, Darlington NHS Foundation Trust. We then have Ms. Karen Pearce, who is our Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at Newcastle Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, and she's also a co-author of the Surash Pearce report. And I also like to give warm welcome to Mr. Russell Ampofo, who is the Director of Education, Training, Examinations at Royal College of Anaesthetists. He is also lay member of Society of Education in Anaesthesia Board. So we had a fantastic presentation by both Mr. Surash and Dr. Patel. What I would like to start off by saying is that, what is currently all those issues that both Mr. Surash and Dr. Patel's raised, so we are aware of them, we've got the data and the results. What is currently being done to address these issues in order to narrow the gap and improve the outcome? Perhaps I'll start with Mr. Surash and Karen, just to see what the Newcastle NHS Trust is doing at the moment.
Shall let Karen speak on behalf of the Trust, is that okay?
Of course.
Hi, I suppose we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, particularly working with our BAME staff network. We've done a number of things over the last 12 months and are continuing. So we first, I suppose, when we started all of this, we held a staff conference. We're very transparent with the data. And I think unlike some other organisations, we haven't shied away from the uncomfortableness of some of the data, as Surash has presented in the report that he's done today. We've implemented a number of initiatives. So we have representation on interview panels at Band 8C and above in all medical and dental panels. We're about to roll that out at Band 6 because the information in the ethnicity pay gap report showed there was a particular problem, you know, at Band 5, Band 6 and Band 7. So we're looking to do that at the moment. We've implemented reverse mentoring of June this year. We have 52 members of staff participating in that, and it's evaluating really well at the moment. We need to do a proper evaluation, and I think what will be key is the learning outcomes and the change, which we've not obviously got to that point as yet. And we're also doing targeted recruitment events. So just before the data in the report was produced, we worked in partnership with 5 local NHS organisations, and we attracted over 400 BME people to that event in terms of opening the NHS up as an opportunity to work. So in Newcastle, we have 2 issues, one in relation to representation of the workforce as a whole, but also in terms of leadership positions. We're repeating that in May 2021, and this time we're taking a systems approach. So we have 8 organisations involved in that, 5 NHS and 3 local councils are also on board with that. And we've been recruiting, as many of you will know, to the new Lighthouse facility, so the North East COVID hub, and we've gone out to widen access in relation to that. And I've seen the first lot of figures in relation to that. We've linked with community organisations, we've done doorstep posts, we've done lots of different ways of targeting particular diverse groups, and the data that I've just seen suggests that that's working. So in terms of our appointment rates, they're significantly higher in those diverse groups to that facility. Obviously, we haven't finished that process yet, but the signs are good. So there's a lot we're doing. But I think what's key is that we work in partnership with our BME staff network, and it take a trust approach to that. Every trust is different. Every trust has a different culture, and there's not necessarily a one size fits all.
That's great. Thank you very much, Karen. I just wonder, going back to Dr. Patel, I wonder if the Manchester NHS Foundation Trust have done anything similar to what Mr. Surash and Karen's done in terms of collecting some data, and if there's anything that the Manchester as a trust have done.
Yeah, so again, kind of within my trust, so a lot of my work has been in my HEE kind of role, so that's kind of hopefully going out broadly more regionally. But within my own trust as well, we have a similar, perhaps not as advanced as how Karen has described it from my understanding, but certainly there are BME staff network groups. There's more sort of sharing of data and that openness, because I think that's half the battle, isn't it, of breaking down those barriers. And I you know, it's uncomfortable sometimes, but I think sharing that and then working through that is really important. So I think it's a journey. We're probably at an earlier stage than how Karen and Surash has described it, but there's certainly a drive to move that forwards in the right direction. And I think, although I never like to think top down of organisations, but you need buy-in, don't you, from organisational level to then make a difference to people on the ground. And certainly within my trust, it seems that, you know, there is buy-in, there is work going on, but not as far down the line. But I would hope that over time, I think everybody's at different stages of that journey, but we have to start somewhere, don't we? So I think that's my sort of organisational experience. But I think, you know, kind of regionally from the HE work that we're doing, there's loads of engagement, and I think everybody, the workforce argument works for me. So I go, and you know, it's not just about trying to make it better for people, you know, on a simplistic term. I think particularly for managers and things, if I use that workforce argument to say, if you've got a workforce where we're maximising potential, recruitment, retention is such a huge issue, and we need to do the right thing, and it doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. So as I said, uncomfortable things to say, certainly at big meetings, but those are the kind of things that I've found which leverage and help the conversation move forwards.
Fabulous. Professor Kumar, is there anything the Health England Education North East is doing to try to narrow these gaps?
We're doing lots and lots of things, as you might guess. I think the first thing to say is Health Education England has now set up a national ED&I committee to look at not just race, but, you know, the gender pay gap reported a few years ago. So what has any organisation done about it? So we can collect data, but we actually need to act. So we now have a national group. But in the Northeast, we've had a group that has looked and monitored for many years. I would say our ED&I strategy has been in place since at least 2012, 2013. And I know that because I wrote it when I was the foundation school director before I became appointed as postgraduate dean. Our whole ethos is about inclusion. And you know, the teams, the way we work, the hierarchy, so we try and make sure we think about these things at every level. But going into, if I'm given some leeway to just answer slightly differently, I think the biggest issue we need to address is our leadership in our NHS boards and trusts, and right at the top in our NHS arm's length body boards. There's very little diversity there, or certainly not one that reflects the population or more the workforce in the NHS. And we all know that a culture of an organisation is most affected by its chief executive. So where is the diversity amongst the boards? And it's not just protected characteristics. I think it's diversity in thought. So you come at a problem differently, you approach it differently. I think Mumtaz makes a great point about workforce, but actually you improve profits. The example I give when I do talks on this is the Yorkshire Ripper. the diversity or the lack of diversity in the police force looking for the Yorkshire Ripper, who they were convinced that the Yorkshire Ripper wanted to kill prostitutes, and actually he was killing all sorts of women. But that lack of thinking more broadly led to death of women that perhaps could have led to that man being caught sooner. So there's lots of good reasons. Sorry, I went right off there, but there's lots of things that we're doing. I couldn't do it in one question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ampofo, as a representative Royal College of Anaesthetists, I believe that the Royal College have published a report on the differential attainment from the examination point of view, I believe back in 2016 or 17, apologies, I can't remember on top of my head. So just for the audiences who may not be very familiar with it, perhaps would you be able to tell us what you found and what the college is doing in order to improve the outcome of that?
Sure, yes, thank you. So we've been, I think firstly, before I get into that question, I just want to say how thankful I am to be on this panel and discussion, how important this issue is. And I've been really taken aback by some of the presentations today and in this section. Now, focusing on what the college have been doing, we've been looking at differential attainment in the examination since around 2014. And you're correct, we produced a report into differential attainment, particularly in the examination in 2017. What we undertook in that work was an observational study looking at the data over a number of years from our candidates taking the exam. And the data was separated out into curriculum areas as well to try and help us look at the different groups, and particularly the areas of the curriculum and the syllabus that were that people performed either better or worse in. So, as I say, published in 2017, it was led by two very senior examiners. The results of the high-level results of the report outlined that if you were a white anaesthetist with a UK primary medical qualification and had English as a first language, and also were in a training post, you scored higher in your postgraduate examinations. And unfortunately, this is a trend that is seen across other medical qualifications and examinations. And I think what we've described in some of the presentations today is that you can see these sorts of differential attainments across a number of different areas, and it does present itself probably more starkly within summative assessments and national examinations. Some of our other results pointed to BME candidates did particularly poorly in all curriculum areas, actually. So it was across the board. I mean, it was quite hard for us to pinpoint any particular area that we could perhaps give some more support to BME candidates. There were differences in males and females. So in the data that we looked at, female generally did better in communication skills and obstetrics, whereas males performed better in cardiothoracic anaesthesia, equipment and science. And the interesting point were for the areas for UK graduates that fared slightly less well than others was around anatomy. So that may give a sense of the teaching program and training program in the UK. So as I say, we've been doing quite a bit of work in this area to support, and specifically in our examinations, to try and minimise bias in our examinations and to recruit and select the right examiners for our examination process. So we've undertaken blind selection processes and recruitment processes, and we have mandatory training for all of our examiners who come into our examination process. And at each point, a lot of the discussion has been around data today, and I can't stress enough the importance of collecting data, analysing data, and I think, as Karen said, is be just brave and transparent in producing and publishing that data. And there will be questions that flow from that, and there may be some uncomfortable questions that flow from that, but I think all organisations, and the college are one of those organisations which are open to kind of address those questions. I'll stop there. There's a few other things that we've been doing around training, but I think our work is centred mostly within the examination process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ampofo. That was a very detailed explanation. Just kind of going back to what I suppose everyone's mentioned so far, and especially Prof. Kumar's mentioned about having a diversity at the kind of right at the top of the hierarchy, really, just some representations. Is there something that we can do to try to help with this? For example, the things that I can think of is that maybe kind of some diversity within the recruitment scheme. So having maybe BME member on the recruitment panel, perhaps they can help with the whole process. I don't know what your thoughts are regards to that. Shall we start with Professor Kumar first? Sorry.
Yes, I think yes, you do have to take care. So many of my white male colleagues in HEE are now refusing to go and speak at events where the speakers are all white and male, and it's not that we don't love white male people, it's just about encouraging diversity. So for me, that's never been an issue, because I come along and immediately the panel looks different. But for some of our colleagues, they are thinking about this differently, and I think we all do have a responsibility to call it out and just say, really, were there no women who could speak on this subject? Or really, is there no one from any other ethnicity who could speak on this subject? I think we do have to start participating when there are consultations about how the NHS is run. We're not good at that as a profession, and then we complain bitterly when things don't fall the way we want them to. So if you don't participate, then you don't have a seat at the table and decisions are made without you. And it's as important for diversity as it is for just about everything else that bothers us as doctors working in the NHS. So we need to increase our participation. We need to point it out when it's not right. You could have all sorts of quotas, but what we have to avoid is tokenism. Because if other people believe you're just there to make it politically correct or make up the numbers, then that backfires and doesn't allow you and your expertise to be acknowledged, which is why you're primarily there. So it needs to be handled very sensitively, in my view.
Thank you very much. Dr. Patel, I believe Manchester Royal Infirmary has already implemented this, so having a BME member in the recruitment panel. Have your organisation got any result from that, any kind of outcome that you could potentially share with us?
So yes, so that's true, and I think as Namita was saying, I think all organisations have got that responsibility to look at how the panels are structured, and also empowering and supporting individuals to be on that panel. So that tokenism comment made me smirk, Namita, because I've had that, as in, oh yes, we've got, it looks right now, and you think, well, no, it's not for that reason. I am making a contribution, I'd like to think, you know, rather than just being the person on the panel. So I think from MFT perspective, my own trust, yes, you know, kind of the BME sort of staff networks from that side of things, I think always get invited for sort of recruitment at all levels, you know, whether it's, you know, exec, you know, high leadership, management roles and things. I don't have data to hand, but I'm sure that is available to kind of show, but that's been some work that's been happening over the last few years. And from my college role, again, you know, there's a real positive drive for diversity, which again, I think, you know, and I certainly feel it's not a token gesture, it is meant in a positive way, and role modeling. So I think if a few people do it, then others will join. So I think it's trying to empower others to do it, just because of our own sort of personal backgrounds or self-belief issues. I think sometimes you don't always go and do it because you kind of think, oh gosh, maybe I won't fit in. But if more people do it, then hopefully you're giving or setting a good example to others to join, to do it for those right reasons as well. So I think it's all moving in the right direction, but I would like to think, and again, from what Namita was saying, if we don't join, then how can we drive it and make a difference? So I think, you know, you always say, oh gosh, you know, I'm not part of the consultation, you know, is that my place or not? But if you start questioning that, exactly like you say, when the outcomes come, then you think, well, if you've invited or are part of it or can be part of it, you should be, and it is your place. So it's making other people believe that as well. And certainly I try and do that both on an individual and a sort of a group organizational level as well. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Surash, please.
Can I be extremely controversial here? Because at the end of the day, that's the whole point about having a panel discussion. And I like to be controversial, if anybody follows me on Twitter. Right, so let's break this down. There's little evidence to support that BAME representation at an interview has any proven benefit. The second thing that I would say is that the decision is almost already made before, well, at shortlisting, so before the interview has actually been done. So if we're going to really look at the journey of an interview, we need to look at the way that people are shortlisted, because I certainly know from my own experience of shortlisting, I already know who the candidate is. It doesn't matter how much you want to try and anonymize it, I already know who they are. You know, unfortunately, that is a base reality. The next thing I would say is that, you know, supporting Namita's comment about tokenism, it is absolutely true. I sat in on one interview last year, and I did feel like I was the token person there. I've spoken to one of our senior nursing staff who sat in a consultant's interview. He said, well, how am I, as a nurse, going to challenge a couple of consultants over what they're doing? So, you know, as much as I do support the idea of having representation, you know, there's a whole journey in this pathway. And, you know, I'm sorry, we need to start the shortlisting process as well, because we already know that the deal's done almost by the time we got to interview. So anyway, I thought I'd put that up for discussion, because I think we need to be able to see all sides of this argument, not just the rose gold side of it.
I think there is evidence from one of the London trusts that shows it's not specific to medical interviews, but it does show that having diverse panels has changed their recruitment pattern. But what it's also done is given those people who are on the panel experience of what a good interview looks like for when they get there. So at Newcastle, we've changed our policy to say that you don't have to be a higher band to be on the interview panel, and it's a development. We went out for band 6s literally yesterday to sit, not band 6s, BME staff to sit on interview panels, and we've had over 50 responses already to say that they think it's a good thing, and it's kind of widening access. And I get what Surash is saying, and I do think there are elements in relation to shortlisting, and I do think we need to change the culture so that the person on the panel isn't tokenistic. I've heard that myself within the organisation, and when I've heard that, we've spoken to members of the panel and fed that back to say they're not the token person. They don't have to ask the E&D panel question. They're part of the panel and they're part of the decision making. And I think for medical appointments, it doesn't have to be a medical person. That person's not there to talk about the medical clinical capability of the individual. They're there to be part of that whole discussion. So I think it swings and roundabouts. I think there are some positives. I think there are some areas where we do have to look and make sure it isn't seen as a tokenistic exercise, because it can very quickly fall into that. And I think we have an approach in Newcastle where we have an evaluation. So when someone sits on a panel, we effectively speak to the chair of the panel, we speak to the person who was on the panel, who was the BAME representative, and we take learning from that and we feed it back. So it's kind of a full circle approach. But I do think in terms of shortlisting, I think sometimes people do go into that knowing who their candidate is, and I do think we need to stop that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Dr. Bell, would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Oh, lots. But anyway, what I'm really interested in from Russell is, has it made a difference, Russell, to the exam result? I know it's short term, but any difference in the differential attainment stats now that you know that they're there?
So we've been trying to monitor this over time, and we're working with the GMC to look at the data. It's hard to tell, so I think it's around about a 10% differential attainment, and I think across medicine it's around about 11%. But I think it's really difficult, because at the point at which they are sitting a postgraduate medical examination, differential attainment has happened way before then, actually, and it's happened in probably all of our lives way before we've even come to this point. So it's probably just another measurement that we probably need to look a lot further back in time. And I know there've been a lot of presentations around looking into medical schools, and I think Mumtaz was presenting a strategic approach around looking at differential attainment. And I think that's exactly what we need, really to look really early, and I think to be really proactive in our support and identification of differential attainment. And I think connecting up the different organisations such as HEE, Royal Colleges, professional bodies, in education institutions is the right thing to do.
Surash, yeah.
So I think, Ross has put up this important point, especially when it comes to differential attainment. So what we see, especially within organisations, is that people who obviously have trained within the UK system, who've been to medical school, have a knowledge base in terms of what they need to do in order to succeed. And that's whether that's in the terms of courses, in terms of who to speak to, how to approach an exam, how to do audits, how to apply for jobs. Now, this is something that international medical graduates are at a lot of, and they will quite often come, we have people in our own department who will come to me and say, listen, Surash, I don't know what we need to do, how do I help? And I think this is something that we really need to focus on, which is how do we help our IMGs in order that they have the same skill set and knowledge base to be able to achieve what our UK graduates achieve too.
Yes, that's very interesting. So my next question actually was going to be something along those lines. So as a UK graduates, we are told from the very beginning, you need to do this, you need to go through foundation, core training, specialty training, to sit the exam, do this course, do an audit, etc. But as Mr. Surash has mentioned, there isn't so much guidance, shall I say, for the international medical graduates or doctors who are coming from other countries and working as a trust doctor, etc. So do you feel that what do you think we can do in terms of like mentoring and supporting these non-UK graduates, potentially to help them enter the specialty training, or maybe help them find the alternate routes such as CSER? Dr. Patel, please.
Yeah. Sorry, Surash, did you want to answer first, or shall I? Okay, oh, bless you. Okay, so no, I was just going to say, I mean, the earlier support that we can top load support, the better, because if we're waiting for outcomes to happen, as Russell was saying, with exams and things, that's too late down the line. So a lot of the recent work that I've been involved with is kind of that integration into the UK and how we can kind of top load the support early. Whether that's kind of with resources, whether that's kind of providing that early kind of mentoring relationship with other trainees. So it's not just about the knowledge and skills and the resource, it's that softer skills as well, which is the bits that I think they really miss out on, which is kind of the networking and the bits that have happened either at medical school or at foundation training here. So how can we instill that early? And there's loads of programs, within the country, whether it's college-wide, HEE-wide, that have done this really well. So what I'm trying to collate, and I'm sure Namita will support me and others, as in collating all those areas of good practice and sharing them widely, because there's toolkits, there's, kind of packages of support that have been put together. And the work that I'm doing now is more or less trying to evaluate that kind of stepwise early support, both sort of the resource aspect, but also the softer skills aspect. How do we do that? Whether that's, I don't think mentoring itself is the complete answer, but providing that softer supervision, enhanced supervision, more tailored learning needs analysis. What are the gaps? But what they may not know what the gaps are at an early stage. So it's trying to kind of meet somewhere in the middle where we can, like I say, top load support is my key word for the day, of making that into a package that you could offer to hopefully then sort of see them through the journey. Otherwise, they start on a really negative footing, and that's what we're doing to them because we're not supporting them. So I think that's my take on it. That helps.
So we'll go to Mr. Surash and then Dr. Bell. So Mr. Surash first.
So just a very quick thing. So up until recently, I was the medical tutor looking after all our locally employed doctors, and that stopped recently. But I worked very closely with a chap called Uma Shulal, who was our SES medical education lead. And what the two of us provided was a service where we organised a program, which was the end of the program. We were there for support and being able to know, for any international medical graduate, they could come to us. Now, we do know that most international medical graduates are local employed doctors rather than training grade doctors. I'm sure Namita and Mumtaz would agree with me that I think, Health Educated England perhaps need to, probably also be able to take part of that narrative as well, in being able to support our local employed doctors at an organisational level, not just, the trainees. But I think, there's a lot of good work that can happen within organisations to ensure that we can mentor our international graduates in a way that they do understand what needs to be done and help them, hopefully, if need be, get through CSER and become consultants if they wish to at the end of it.
Yeah. I know, Namita, you wanted to make it.
Yeah, if I may, I won't go on too long. So I think going back to the previous points, what you're talking about is a hidden curriculum. That sometimes it doesn't matter how much formal teaching and support you offer, these things don't appear until you failed an exam or didn't get a job. So North Tees, for example, did social inductions for families when people come over, not just around the pub and going out, but bowling, picnics. And I think every organisation should be thinking about how their staff are welcomed in as employees and integrated with their team. I think the key is integration, because a lot of what you learn is through chit chat, and through what you might do in your tea breaks. We used to support each other through our messes, which we don't have that informal networking. We used to have grand rounds with our primary care colleagues. We don't have that informal networking. So we need to recreate that in a way that's helpful and supportive. With regards to locally employed doctors, so foundation trusts, particularly in this region, are absolutely clear where their responsibilities are and where mine is as the postgraduate dean. And unfortunately, locally employed doctors aren't my responsibility. And you will all know the battles that I've had to try and do the right thing. But we have all been put under extreme pressure to deliver what we're accountable for, but that doesn't mean any SAS or locally employed or any doctor who wants to access our support isn't able to. I think it's about how we work more effectively, and I actually think that foundation trusts perhaps need to integrate and work a little bit better rather than this. And I'm sure Karen won't like this. Most people don't. I hate the term organisational development, because the NHS is not one organisation, and we have so many restructures. If you become wedded to one approach in one organisation, you're continuously grieving as it becomes another one. So I think some of those things that strategically we're trying to do, think above the organisation, think about the right thing to do, and then pool our resources would be a far better approach. Thanks.
Dr. Bell?
Yes, it was just a slightly broader thought on two angles. We've heard a lot about data, and clearly data has currency. And I was interested in Mrs. Surash's comments about subjective data is easy to ignore, and I think that is absolutely true. And that's subtext, that's the hidden curriculum, is all the subjective stuff. And I think hard data is vital, because that makes people sit up and pay attention, and it is impossible to ignore. One thing I was thinking about myself with the data when we're talking about UK white and UK BME graduates was, do we stratify the UK BME graduates to how long they've been part in the culture, if I can put it that way? So are they from a home where English isn't their first language, so when they're at home English isn't spoken? There's a lack of clarity as to whether you say first generation or second generation, but I would say people who not only have been at school in the UK right from birth, if you like, but also their language at home is also English. Does that make a difference in terms of differential attainment? And on a completely different tack, just again to throw it up, you're looking at incredibly successful people here from a hugely diverse background, and we actually have no white men in the panel. So how did everybody get here? You know, why has it worked for us? And perhaps there are many people in the audience who feel it hasn't worked for them. I'm old enough to remember Russell when he was just a young lad at the college, and now, you know, he's Director of Education. And I remember Surash as a new consultant, and look at him now, Mummy's so proud. And I remember Prof Kumar when she started as Dean, and so on and so forth. And I've known Jay since he was a fetus, I think. So, you know, how did we get here? And others may feel that they haven't. Are two completely diverse points that have just been running through my head. Thank you.
Can I just pick up the point about the generational thing, Kathryn? I think that's a really important point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is that, you know, part of when I was doing the report was to actually speak to people as well, because you cannot code for first generation versus second generation. And I do think, with, you know, second generation people like myself have a very different experience to people like my mother, who had a very harsh time when she came to this country and worked in the NHS. There's also a big problem with BAME. I mean, first of all, I will say I do not like the name BAME. I don't understand why BAME went to BME. But the problem with the whole BAME nomenclature is that you immediately alienate anybody who's from Europe, anybody who's from Africa, who's Caucasian. Do you see what I mean? So, you know, there's a difficulty in that. So when we look at the data, we're looking at a very small part of that data. What we do not see is the overall picture of how different generations work and how people from Europe or America or Australia experience things as well. So I think we need to use this as an example, but we must also accept the fact that it's not truly reflective of the organisation of the NHS.
Thank you very much. Wow, it's been a fantastic.
Mumtaz was wanting to join. If we've got time, Mumtaz.
Sorry, yeah, Dr. Patel, please.
No, sorry, no, I was just going to add to that. So kind of the same similar points, intersectionality, isn't it? Of we're all different in lots of different ways, and everything interrelates. And when you think about the protected characteristics, we're probably all tick a box somewhere. So I don't also like, you know, being grouped into one thing, because I think we all have, but I think it's trying to understand the different needs and looking at it more broadly is certainly what I try and do, rather than grouping so much, because that in itself is secular and puts people off the whole thing. And Kathryn, your point about getting to different points. So one of the talks that I give, you know, differently to what I've just done today is my educational journey, which I think people quite enjoy, and I get quite sort of personal and emotional even talking about it, because it is a journey, isn't it? And we've all been through different things, but I try and break it down to kind of barriers, but how to overcome it. And some is chance, some is opportunistic, as in opportunities, but you know, kind of how can one person do one thing, whereas maybe another person can't. And I think sharing those experiences, which I'm much more confident talking about now, is really important, because then others may feel empowered to kind of do so. So when you go back to medical school and things, I mean, I didn't get into medical school, you know, I had to take a year out and then, you know, work, and I had all the grades, but I didn't have all the social bits that you talked about at interview, and not so confident. So, you know, kind of you then talk about those kind of things, and then hopefully you empower others to say, actually, just stick at it. You know, you're really good, you know, sort of thing. And it's believing in yourself to then drive others. So really great points, I think, raised here today, and hopefully it'll help the bigger audience who are listening as well.
Yes, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Patel. We're getting quite a lot of questions from the audiences, and one of the questions that's been coming repeatedly is actually directed to probably Mr. Ampofo. So the question is that it's good to see the Royal College of Anaesthetists doing a lot to kind of try to reduce the bias, but are you aware any other colleges, whether they're doing the same thing or not? Oh,
so it's been really helpful for organisations like that we work with, like HEE and the GMC, to also take on this issue of differential attainment. And I can say across the academy, it's been something that all of the Royal Colleges continually look at. I mean, we look at our own section, and I do think that we could look a little bit more broadly across the whole life cycle of a doctor or an anaesthetist. So we've been looking at differential attainment, or the attainment gap within recruitment, within ARCPs, and then within examinations. And so the college has been doing quite a bit of work to look at a strategic approach around equality, diversity and inclusion. And I think Namita mentioned the importance around diversity of inclusion and in diversity of our voices. And so we've been quite key to look at diversity from our staff group, and then look at our leadership positions, so our regional advisors, college tutors, examiners, and council, but then look at our membership as well. And I hope that some of our strategic approaches could be mirrored from other colleges. It may be that we need to learn from other colleges. We've seen some really good work from I think the Royal College of Surgeons have just published an independent commission into equality and diversity, and I believe the paediatricians have done as well. So I think now is the time is prime for all of this to really take some hold. And I really do feel that rather than working in siloed groups, there is a real opportunity to pool our resources and work collaboratively with our organisations and stakeholders.
Thank you. Dr. Patel, were you wanting to add anything to?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add to say, similarly, I think from the Royal College of Physicians, there's been quite a lot of work. So my previous role was with Federation, which was the 3 college-wide, looking at MRCP, UK examination, ARCP outcomes, and then the training environment, because I think that is a huge part of what drives outcomes rather than looking at the end results. So I think there's some, and the RCP has also produced an EDI report only in September, which was uncomfortable reading for some of us, but also eye-opening to others. So I think that's really good, and I'm part of the diversity inclusion group for that, in which we've got 13 recommendations to work through, which I'm sure will be really, really great, but also sustainable. I mean, I think it's not tick box, we've done it, move along. I think it has to be embedded in a way that's actually going to drive and make differences. So my work with HEE, GMC and colleges has been across colleges, but I think maybe from the academy perspective, it would be great to cross-work across themes so that we're not reinventing the wheel. I'm sure we're all doing great stuff, but not doing it in silos, and working across colleges would be something that I'd be very much up for. And I mean, those are the discussions that are already happening, but hopefully try and move that agenda forward so that we're learning and sharing, rather than, because everybody's starting point will be slightly different, won't it? So why let a new, kind of comer be struggling to find their way? We can provide some of those thinking and resources at the top end, so we're all learning and moving forwards. Thank you. Sorry, I'm doing too much talking. I'll shut up.
Thank you very much. We could go on for hours talking about this, but unfortunately we are limited to about 30 minutes. So thank you very much, everybody, for your wonderful insight, knowledge, and talk presentations. Hopefully we can do this again at some point.